Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the English with Gemma podcast. So, before we get into today's topic, I wanted to talk about something kind of random, but it's something that I've noticed. Anyways, I'll just tell you what it is. So, basically, like last week, I felt so anxious and I was just feeling all over the place and really weird. And I spoke to a few other people, and they were also kind of feeling like that. And then recently, I've seen so many Instagram videos of people basically saying that we were in Mercury retrograde and now we're not anymore or something. And that's why the energy was really weird. I'm not like super into astrology. I know a lot of people are like very into it and very knowledgeable about all the different star signs and what the alignment of the planets means and all that stuff. I'm personally not, but I do believe in energy and I do find it quite interesting when I don't know if it's just a coincidence, but I felt really weird. And then I saw all those videos that were saying that the energy was really weird. And now I feel a lot better. And the videos were saying that now people should start to feel a little bit better and more in balance and stuff. So I'm just interested to know if any of you guys felt that weird energy last week. And if you were also kind of feeling all over the place, or if it was just me. But yeah, and if you're into astrology and you know more about that, then definitely let me know. I know that was kind of random, but I just wanted to mention it because I thought it was quite interesting. And yeah, I'm feeling much better this week. Last week, I literally felt crazy, but this week I feel a little bit more sane. So let's get away from that random topic. Today's topic on episode 6. I can't believe we're already on episode 6. That's so exciting. We are going to be talking about why English is such a difficult language to learn, and then how to make it easier for yourself. So, I have lots of notes. I will be reading my notes. If you see me looking down, if you're watching the video on YouTube, I apologize. I do need my notes because this is quite a big topic. So, I would like to start off today's episode by reading a little extract that I found from a blog post on the Oxford Royale website. I'm not sure who is responsible for that website, whether it's affiliated with like Oxford Dictionary or not, but I just really liked this little extract. Okay, here it goes. Why is English so hard to learn as a non-native speaker? It just makes no sense. One of the reasons why English is known for being difficult is because it's full of contradictions. There is no ham in hamburger. Neither is there any apple nor pine in pineapple. If teachers taught, why didn't preachers prot? If a vegetarian eats vegetables, what does a humanitarian eat? Overlook and oversee have completely opposite meanings, while look and see basically mean the same thing. Native speakers rarely stop to think how illogical many of the things we say really are. We're just used to them. Unless you've been brought up speaking English, how can you possibly begin to learn all these oddities? It's no surprise that people trying to learn English often end up feeling confused. So I just liked that as the intro for today's episode because I think it really highlights, yeah, English is kind of a weird language and it doesn't really make a lot of sense a lot of the time. There are languages that I think are much more logical, but it doesn't mean that English is like the most difficult language to learn, but it definitely is tricky. And I'm not sure if any native speakers would be watching or listening to this podcast, but if you are, you might be questioning, like, really? Is English difficult to learn as a non-native? I promise you it is. And I also didn't realize before I obviously got into English teaching I had no idea about how the language actually worked. I just could speak it because I had been speaking it my whole life, right? So yeah, now that I kind of know how English works and I see all these weird exceptions and irregularities, I can definitely confirm that it is hard. English is tricky to learn. But it's not impossible. And this episode is going to highlight some of the weird things about English, but then also give you solutions. So, the structure, I'm going to talk about these following topics: grammar irregularities and exceptions, non-phonetic language, so the fact that English is not phonetic, which I will explain what that means a bit later on. Um, Emphasis, like word stress and sentence stress, intonation, things like that. Slang, idioms, dialects, and accents. So those are the topics I'm going to be covering. And like I said before, the structure is going to be kind of presented as these weird problems of English and then solutions. So I'm not just going to leave you hanging. I'm going to also try and give you some solutions to these problems and hopefully make you feel a little less frustrated and a little bit more motivated. All right, so first up are grammar irregularities and exceptions. So, like, some tricky things about English grammar include topics such as subject-verb agreement. So, things like I like, he, she, it likes, you like. A lot of people struggle with that because, for example, in Spanish, the verb changes and the structure changes for every single pronoun. Whereas in English, it just changes for like third person plural, which can really catch a lot of learners off guard. And that pattern is sometimes hard to remember, adding that S onto the end for the third person singular. Um, then another thing that's kind of tricky, excuse me, about English grammar is like sentence structure, subject, verb, object, but then also like where to put adjectives, the order of adjectives, things like that. And then, of course, irregular verbs. I think like every language has irregular verb tenses, but no matter the language, they're still difficult to memorize, right? Because they don't often follow patterns. Sorry, I'm just checking on my dog. He's sleeping on the couch. He's being such a good boy today. If you watched the last episode, episode 5, he was definitely being very distracting because he sat on my lap the whole episode. But today, I think he knows that he needs to stay on the couch. Okay, so another huge thing is that English is riddled with means it contains a lot of exceptions. English is riddled with exceptions. And my students are probably so sick of me saying, like, well, yes, that is the correct rule, but here's an exception. So it kind of might feel like just as you start to understand a grammar rule, a contradiction just comes up and it makes you want to pull your hair out and scream, right? So a good example of an exception in English, even though it's for spelling and not grammar, but it doesn't matter, is I before E except after C. So that means like when we're spelling a word that has I, E, and C in it, the I comes before the E except if there's a C. For example, believe, receipt, but this is English, so it's not as simple as that. What about words like science or weird or seize? So there are loads of irregularities within that rule. And then, of course, there are a lot of irregular verbs too, such as fought, which is the past tense of fight. However, the past tense of light is lit. So, not lot, right? Why don't we say, yesterday I lit a candle if we say, I fought a battle yesterday? Doesn't follow a pattern, unfortunately. So, what is the solution to these annoying exceptions and irregularities? Just like in any other language, you have to learn the rules themselves, but then also any exceptions to the rules. Now, that might seem self-explanatory, but it's true that a lot of people get really frustrated, but then once you kind of start to notice that a lot of these exceptions actually follow patterns, it will make it easier. So you can like take a look at whatever weird exception that comes up, and then sometimes, not all the time, you can apply it to other things and it will follow the same pattern. Like drink, drank, drunk, sink, sank, sunk, right? Clink, clank, clunk. So that is an irregular verb pattern, but they follow the same pattern. And then, of course, numerous exceptions in a language make it difficult to apply your existing knowledge and then use the same principle with a new word. So it might feel like it's harder to make progress. However, with time, practice, patience, and probably a good sense of humor, you can progress and get better despite these annoying exceptions. So I remember when I was learning Spanish, and honestly, still to this day, because you never really finish learning a language, I found it really difficult to remember all of the complex grammar tenses and the irregular verbs too. And I still don't know a lot. And I make mistakes all the time in Spanish, but you have to learn to trust the process, because getting frustrated and defeated over these annoying irregularities and exceptions, it's not going to make your life any easier or make your progress any faster. So just take it easy, laugh it off, and don't let yourself get demotivated. All right, so our next topic is, by the way, I hope you cannot hear it in the podcast or the video, but there's a gardener outside cutting the grass. Or is he cutting down a tree? It's very loud. I hope it's not being picked up in the background. I do have the background noise canceller on, so crossing my fingers and hoping that is working and you're not picking up that background noise. All right, so next topic is the fact that English is not a phonetic language. So we can all agree that English spelling is weird, and then like if the spelling isn't enough, the pronunciation is also really confusing. So it's not a phonetic language like Spanish, for example. In Spanish, what you see is what you get. And what I mean by that is like words are pronounced exactly how they're spelled. Each letter represents a sound, and then you just pronounce it that way. Of course, there are exceptions, like in any language. For example, hola has an H, but you don't pronounce it. You don't say hola, you say hola. But then a phrase like ¿Cómo estás? How are you? It's literally phonetic, like COMO, como, ESTAS, estás. It's what you see is what you pronounce. However, in English, that is not the case at all. The way words are spelled often don't help at all in giving you any clue of how to pronounce them. So some words are also very low on vowels, like the word strengths, which is hard to say when you're not accustomed to English pronunciation. Strengths, right? There's one vowel sound in there. So in addition to this, words that end in the same combination of letters aren't necessarily pronounced the same way. So what I mean by that, let's take, for example, words that end in O-U-G-H. Okay. So we have T-R-O-U-G-H, which is pronounced as trough. We have R-O-U-G-H, which is pronounced rough. And then we have B-O-U-G-H, which is pronounced bow, as in cow, rhymes with cow. And then, of course, we have a really common word, through, T-H-R-O-U-G-H, which is pronounced through with this oo sound on the end. So even though all those words end with O-U-G-H, they do not sound anything alike. They don't rhyme, which is pretty illogical if you ask me. And then, we have things like silent letters at the start of words. Like we have so many words beginning with a silent K, like knife, or even silent G, like gnome, Gnome. I had to think about that for a second. So, like, you might be asking, if it's not pronounced, what's the point of including a silent letter in the first place if it only adds to confusion for both native speakers and learners? So it is frustrating, but like I promised you at the beginning of the episode, I have a solution. So my solution for this is becoming aware of the phonetic alphabet. Now, I don't think that there is a single student that I have who I haven't taught the phonetic alphabet to in some way or the other. So even if we haven't gone super in depth about it, I always present my students with the phonetic alphabet to give them a better understanding and a better chance at being able to decipher how words are supposed to be pronounced. So you might be asking, well, what is the phonetic alphabet? Especially if you're a native speaker, which I don't think there are that many of you listening, but maybe. You might not have ever heard of the phonetic alphabet before. I certainly hadn't before I started teaching English. So, when you look in the dictionary and you see those weird little symbols next to the word, those are phonetic symbols. So, the phonetic alphabet is a table with symbols on it. Now, a lot of people will see those symbols and so like the consonant symbols on the phonetic alphabet, they look like the letters B, T, D, C. They look like those letters in lowercase. Some of them, not all of them. So a lot of people get confused and they think the phonetic alphabet is letters. They are not letters. They are just symbols that represent sounds. Okay. So on the phonetic alphabet, you have different sections. You have vowels, diphthongs, which are a combination of two vowel sounds together, like oi or a, starts as one vowel sound and slides into the other. That's a diphthong. And then you have a big section at the bottom, which is, of course, our consonants, like p, b, t, d, those kind of sounds. So I think the phonetic alphabet is really interesting because every single sound in English, every phoneme sound is on there. So that really helps because if English is not a phonetic language and you look at my name, for example, you see Gemma. Now, if you've never heard my name out loud before, how are you supposed to know whether it's Gema, Gemma, Gemma? A lot of native speakers in Bermuda actually pronounce my name Gemma. They say that they see the G and they don't understand that it's that J sound as in judge. They think it's G as in grape, G coming from your throat. So, it's a problem amongst native speakers and non-natives. And the way that we can find a solution to this problem of not knowing how something is supposed to be pronounced based solely off of what it looks like is by implementing our friend, the phonetic alphabet. Because if you look at the phonetic alphabet or you look at my name and you transcribe my name into those symbols, you will see, of course, I cannot show you right now, but you will see symbols that represent the following sounds. You'll see a symbol that represents J. You'll see a symbol that represents eh. You'll see one symbol representing the sound m, ma. And then you'll see a schwa, which is a symbol that represents the sound uh. So then once you see those symbols, you'll be able to sound it out. J, e, m, Gemma, right? Not Gema, not Gemma, Gemma. So that is how you use the phonetic alphabet. I hope that made sense. It's kind of hard to explain it just on audio and not being able to show you anything. So the thing about the phonetic alphabet is you don't have to memorize it at all. I don't even have it memorized. I do, in my head, I can see most of it and I can see most of those symbols without too much effort, but I definitely can't see all of them in my mind's eye. So I don't have it totally memorized. But you can always you can have a copy of the table or you can look on your phone, right? And the cool thing about this, the ways in which you can use it are you can literally type any word into Google and put phonetic pronunciation or phonetic spelling, and you will get a transcription, which means you will see just the phonetic symbols, which of whatever word, let's say the word information. Okay, so you'll see the phonetic symbols that say information, and you'll know, okay, that's how you pronounce it. So that is how you implement it. That's how you can use it. I think just having some type of awareness of phonology and phonetic symbols is really useful when you feel frustrated about pronunciation. Okay, my next topic is emphasis. So, to make things even more complex, the way in which you emphasize certain words in a sentence can subtly change its meaning. So, just now, when I said that sentence, I emphasized the word emphasize. I said, the way in which you emphasize certain words in a sentence can subtly change its meaning. So in that sentence, I emphasized the word emphasize and sentence. Why did I do that? Because I wanted to draw attention to those words. So let's have a look at the following phrases below. Actually, it's the same phrase with different emphasis. All right, I'm going to say it at first as a plain statement. I sent him a letter. In that case, I did not emphasize a word. I sent him a letter. Let's try it again with emphasis on I. I sent him a letter. This is used to imply that you sent him the letter, someone else didn't send it. I sent it, not you, not Hermione. Sorry, if you watch Harry Potter, you'll get that reference. So it means not me, not you, not someone else, just I. Okay. I sent him a letter. Let's try this sentence putting the emphasis on the word sent. I sent him a letter. This could imply I sent him a letter, but I'm not sure if he received it. Or maybe it's implying that you didn't email the letter, you physically sent it. I sent him a letter. Let's emphasize now him. I sent him a letter. This is used to imply that you sent him the letter. You didn't send it to his girlfriend, his mom, someone else. You sent him the letter. And then finally, let's emphasize the word letter. I sent him a letter. I sent him a letter. So you're emphasizing that you sent him a letter, not a birthday card, not a bunch of flowers. You sent him a letter. Okay? So when you're not used to speaking English, these kind of might sound all the same to you, but it's only once we've been constantly exposed to English that we'll start to pick up on these subtle differences in emphasis. And my solution to this problem, if you find it difficult to emphasize or to actually hear the emphasis, is try to expose yourself to as many different versions of natural English as possible, because this will help you to start picking up how people are emphasizing in their sentences. And then you can start to play around with putting emphasis on words in your own sentences. And then over time, this will make you just become more comfortable with speaking in general, and it'll make your speech sound more natural because nobody speaks like this in English and we don't sound like a robot, right? So you need to get used to this natural rhythm, putting intonation on the ends of your sentences. Yeah, because that's how people talk, and you want to sound natural and kind of cool and like you're chill when you're speaking. And this comes easily to me when I speak my second language, which is Spanish, because the Spanish intonation is very similar to English, like sentences going up at the end for questions, like ¿Quieres comer? Do you want to eat? It's the same, right? Same pattern. However, some of my students from Russia, for example, have a really difficult time with emphasis and intonation and word stress because in Russian, it's a very monotone language, one tone, right? Or at least that's what I've been told by my Russian students. So it doesn't come as naturally to them to have this expressiveness when they speak. But like I said, practice makes progress, right? So don't get frustrated. You will get there. You just have to practice, practice, practice. And this leads us on to our last topic, which is slang and idioms. and then like dialects and accents. So there are so many things that are considered totally natural and normal amongst English speakers, and they are just natural in everyday English, but they might sound really weird and confusing to you while you're still learning English. So, for example, like it's really common in American slang. Well, maybe in British too, a little bit, depends where you're from in England, but it's common to say ain't instead of isn't. So, for example, he ain't going to the party means he isn't going to the party. Now, many people will say, well, that's not grammatical English, and they would be right. However, there's no denying that there are entire populations of native English speakers that use the language in this way. So instead of trying to fight against that, I just prefer to validate and appreciate how versatile and alive languages are and how they're always changing and being adapted by those who use it to communicate. So you don't have to use slang if you don't want to, right? Especially not in formal context, especially not when you're, speaking business English or you're in a formal meeting. You don't want to start saying, I ain't coming into work tomorrow, right? But I think having an awareness and an understanding of slang and different versions of English, different accents, it's really going to help you communicate better with native speakers and also not feel so confused when you are in the real world and hear people talking differently from your English textbooks and listening exercises, right? Because a lot of the time, when you're not exposed to real life English, you get into the real world and you're like, whoa, what is happening? This is not English. But the truth is, it's like, yes, it is. I remember when I went to Spain, I had only ever learned Spanish in a classroom setting and I'd never spoken it. I'd only really heard it. And I got to Spain and in the airport, they were like, I don't know, dame tu pasaporte, por favor. And I was like, what? Give me your passport, please. But he said it so fast that I was just like, oh my God, I don't speak Spanish. I don't actually know Spanish. I know maybe some verb endings, but I don't know how to speak the language, right? So that's why it's so important to listen to natural, real life English and listen to things like this podcast or my YouTube vlogs and things like that, where I'm speaking at a normal pace and speaking very naturally and fluidly. That's how you really learn English. And then you have to also practice, of course. You have to practice speaking in order to get better. So, in conclusion, not everyone sounds the same or speaks English in the same way. And I think in order to better prepare yourself for that, so my solution for you is again, expose yourself to as many different accents as possible and watch TV series that have slang in them. And then every time you feel confused or you say, oh, that's a weird word, or I don't know what they mean by that, look it up and then make a note of it. So this also applies to different dialects and accents. Not everyone sounds the same or speaks English in the same way. So in order to better prepare yourself for that, I think you should try to expose yourself to as many different accents as possible. That would be my solution for you, watching YouTube videos, listening to podcasts, listening to TV series with different slang and accents. That will really help. So, that being said, that concludes today's episode. As always, thank you for listening and watching. I'm really enjoying this podcast, and I hope you are too. Let me know what you would like to see next. And until then, happy learning. Bye.